All right, guys. Today our guest is Amir Jalali.
That's right.
He is a seasoned real estate developer. I get this question a lot when I speak with, we're like, I talk with new investors. They ask, I ask them kind of like, well, what do you want to do? And so I hear a lot of times, well, I want to build houses, or I want to build this, and I want to build that, and I'm not a developer. I don't build, but I thought it'd be a great idea to bring someone on who does that and can give some insight to what that looks like, and can tell the audience more about what it is to build and go through those things because I, I've bought, but I haven't built. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so anyhow, I'm going to introduce Amir here. Amir is, like I said, he's got lots of experience, and so, man, I'm gonna let him take it off or take away and just kind of tell about how everybody about yourself and how you got started and all that.
Yeah. So let me make sure I'm good here. Um, I've been doing it for I want to say 6 years.
Okay.
But of course, my dad. I'm gonna bring up my dad a lot in this because
No,
he's my
yeah,
mentor.
that's good. That's
He's my
good.
main man there. So, my dad's been doing it since '99,
Okay.
and so almost 23 years. So he's been doing it for a while. He's an investor. He's a builder. He's a developer. Um, both on the residential and the commercial. So he's got the real experience, and he's just passing that to me, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can from him. So,
Did
um,
any of your siblings go and
yeah, one of
do
my
the same
brothers is
thing
a
or?
realtor. The other one's into stocks, so he works for a company. He works for TD Ameritrade,
Mhm.
and then the other one's a realtor, so for residential.
Yeah.
So, yeah, currently building commercial retail, finishing up that one. And like I was saying earlier, we just got done with the multifamily. And
Mm.
then before that, we did. So, I was young and, I like to say I was a part of it, but I really wasn't. But, when I
Yeah.
was younger, just when you're with your dad and you see him working, um, a few restaurants, shopping center, and, a lot of what originated was from land. So the properties that we've built are on our own land. And so the
Okay.
deals worked out through our,
So you buy the land first,
right.
and then you go, okay. Do you figure out what to do with it later, or do you just buy
Uh,
it, or you have a plan? Like, you know what, we could put this on here,
mhm.
or how do you like? What's that process look
Normally,
like?
whatever it's zoned, we'll look at that first, but it just depends on the area. I mean,
Mm.
we've changed this like, for the multifamily, it was zoned commercial retail. We changed the zoning to, I don't know what it was exactly, but, it was a mixed-use development, so we were able to do that with that property. But it is important. I mean, the land is super important, not only for what we're gonna build on it, but for our loan purposes. So,
Yeah.
we normally use that for the down payment as a collateral. So
Okay.
whatever that equity in that land is, you transfer it over as a collateral, as the equity into the down payment into the term of the loan. So it helps with the costs.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
yeah.
So little tricks of the trade. I want to get into that
Yeah.
here in a bit. So, what before we jump into that, kind of some strategies and things, I wanted to
Mhm.
ask, kind of, you know, obviously my kids are here with us today. They're watching this and they've gone through they've I think been on so many they've seen so many properties and things, and then I know that there's people who their kids grow up watching their parents do what they do, and sometimes they go completely opposite.
Right.
So for you, what was that like, growing up and watching your dad, you know, buy the land and, build
Yeah.
houses, build different things. Like what did you see as a kid
Right, right.
from that aspect?
Um, so we're Persian. We come from Iran. I was born in Lubbock.
Okay.
So if it's okay with you, I'll just give them like a little
Yeah,
quick
no,
backstory
yeah,
of where
yeah.
my
Of
dad came
course.
from.
Of
So
course, man.
my mom and dad are both from Iran. We're Persian, 100% Persian. I'm the second oldest. So
Mm.
my dad was studying engineering in Iran, and he was at Tehran University, and he came to Texas Tech to work on his doctorate. So he was trying to get a PhD in engineering, but in industrial engineering, so not related to true construction and building and stuff like that. So, um, long story short, with my dad, he ended up having a child when he was, I think, oh man, I don't know if he was in his getting his master's or if he was 2 years away from his PhD, but it was a bump in the road for him.
Mm.
So he had my older brother Chris, and he was still living on campus in the dorm. Um, single dad at that time, so mom wasn't in the picture for him, but, nonetheless, he finished, but the everything kind of originates from that because, like I was telling you a long time ago, back in the day, they would give you cash money for your student, loans
Right.
for school, and so, Texas Tech, at that time, this was, I think, in right after Islamic Revolution, so it was in the '80s or the '90s or something like that, so it wasn't too long ago, but, one semester, he just got the money, and he was taking my brother Chris to daycare across the street, and it was expensive at that I mean, it's still expensive, but for that time, it was expensive. It was a private daycare.
Yeah.
Um, and he noticed it was going for lease, and so he talked to the building owner, and he said, "How much is the lease? Da, 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 da. What if I did a whole semester prepay? Could you give me a discount? Da, da, da." So they negotiated, they worked it out. He used his student loans for that semester, didn't go to school, to lease the space. And I think he said he made around 55,000 or 60,000, so he paid his student loan back and some, and then his daycare business started from there.
That's crazy.
Um,
All because of just
all because of,
that one little thing, like
right.
going taking your brother to daycare, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, daycare's expensive. It's a cost. And so, I mean,
A
you've got to have
necessary
a
cost.
necessary cost. If you've got to work or go to school, you got to have somebody to take care of your kiddos.
So we
You
should
know
have
what I mean?
should we have dropped our kids off at your daycare?
No.
He owns the daycare, by the way.
Right, I have a
Uh,
daycare right now too.
so
But that started the branch of daycare. So it's crazy because he got his PhD in industrial engineering, but he was leasing a daycare. He got a teaching job here at UTA. He came for a semester. He didn't like it. He found another daycare down the street from UTA, the one that I'm at right now, that I
right.
took over, that I bought. And one daycare pretty much led to another. And so my dad's a very, very smart man because his work ethic is like no other. I mean,
Yeah.
you come from a different country, you don't know English, you don't have any money, you're by yourself. He met my mom in Lubbock when he was going to Texas Tech, I think the year he graduated. So they got married shortly after, and then they moved here. And then I was born in Lubbock, and then we moved here to Arlington in the DFW area. And he didn't do the teaching, but the daycares were just picking up. And
Yeah.
one thing led to another. He negotiated ways to where he did the owner finance on one. He owned the building. Um, he renovated. He sold a few. And at one point, he had 6 running daycares. And my mom was the one running it for him while he was doing other things. So the daycare led to good capital. And he opened up, he bought land in Mansfield. And this was, I think, in '98 or '99, so it wasn't terribly long ago, but it was 20 years ago. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Mansfield or not, but it's growing so quickly.
Yeah, yeah, it's
I
growing.
mean, it's the costs and everything, and just the things that are coming there. But the person he bought the land from, it was a holdings company. So it was one guy who had maybe 12 pieces of land, and he was old, unhealthy, they were retired. My dad owner financed most of them. So when he bought one particular property, let's just say this one's the one on Debbie.
Mhm.
This is the one that's now Fish City Grill.
Oh, is
The
it really?
It is,
That's
yeah. We built that one. We
damn.
built
I
Fish
didn't
City.
even. Yeah, yeah.
So when he
No
bought that
wonder.
one, the owner was like,
I gotta ask. Does Alvarez know that?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I
but
don't know. Do you
you,
guys go there often?
he loves that place.
Oh,
Man.
really?
Apparently, they got his bumping DJ. So
Yeah.
I know that some people are here like Alvarez, but like they're he's got like he always talks about the bumping DJ and like they spend a lot of time at Fit. I didn't know that. So he has
Yeah.
the Fish City Grill.
Yeah,
So
we built
okay,
that in 2001. But the owner of that property, so when he owner financed that one, he said, "Hey, hey, Mike, my dad's name is Muhammad or Mike." He said, "Hey, Mike, I have 2 other properties down the street where Fat Daddy's is and where our place is." So my dad had those land at that time. Um, and so he bought the land. He had the income from the daycare. He's like, what do I do with this land? At that time, it was very cheap, obviously. And when you owner finance it from somebody,
oh yeah,
it's a different
it's the
story.
way to go.
There's no interest particular in a way, but
Yeah.
um, so he said, okay, I'm gonna build a restaurant here. There's no country buffet. It was Mansfield Country Buffet. before it was Fish City.
Okay.
And so
Because at that time, there's not a lot out there.
there
I mean,
wasn't a
I
lot
mean,
in Mansfield.
it
No.
was small.
There was a
So
dirt road where Debbie is, a one-way street. So it was very tiny.
it was the country buffet.
Mansfield Country Buffet. Yeah. So he did the country buffet. It did pretty well in the beginning, and then Mansfield started to grow. And then he got an opportunity to buy, I believe it was 13 acres down the street, right across Alvarez, actually, off of Eden and Cooper. So
Okay.
he bought that, and it was the same owner, same landowner. They wanted to owner finance it. Da 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 da. He said, okay, fine. He gave him a small down payment. And what's crazy was it's crazy how things happen. The next month, uh, he got an offer on it from a church.
Hmm.
And I think the church was trying to 1031. I don't know how churches operate with their taxes and stuff, but they were trying to put funds into something quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't know the exact numbers. I keep my dad's info with my dad, so I'm not going to say the exact numbers.
Right.
But let's
Yeah,
just say it
yeah.
was
They offered a good sum.
they offered
Money.
they offered a nice amount, and the following month he got almost triple in asking. So he's doing the down payment and the monthly payment,
Yeah.
and he's maybe in out of pocket, 20, 30, 40K, let's just say.
Yeah.
And he gets an offer where it's 2 million, 3 million the next month from a church. So at that time, he was so happy. He's like, yeah, I'll pay closing costs. I'll do all that. Just, yes, I'll do whatever you, let's go ahead and do it.
Sold.
Whatever you want to do. So it's sold. With that money, he just ended up buying more land. So he did the 1031 to get more land so he doesn't have to pay the taxes on it.
Yeah.
So he bought land across the street. He went downtown, Mansfield, bought land over there. And he just kept investing, just to stay busy.
But he stayed with land. That was the thing.
He stayed with land in the beginning. That's his main thing.
Land.
He had the daycares, he had the restaurant, but the majority of everything went into land.
When you look at land, what is there anything you look at in particular where you go, this would be a good spot?
Definitely the area, but look at what happened with Mansfield. I mean, the area was nothing and it became huge. But
Mhm.
main things to look for is if it's in a flood zone, what the zoning is there any kind of future development plan in the area?
Yeah.
He got so lucky because he bought a property where the multifamily plex is right now in the heart of downtown. And they threw in, I think, 100 million into funds to just redevelop downtown, give it that vibe.
Bam.
And he got so lucky. So his equity went up, his appraisal went up. But I definitely would say that if I'm looking to buy land like my dad, I would look at if it's in a flood zone. Anywhere near other retail is promising because it's gonna grow
It's gonna grow.
eventually. Yeah.
So you're a kid, you're watching this, your dad's buying this land, you're moving along. Like, what are you thinking? I mean, or I guess, let me ask this: at what age? Because I think this is a good one too. What age did you start noticing, like, huh? What are you, what are you doing, Dad?
Yeah.
Because as a kid, like they're just dragging me around. Get in the car. We got to go look at this. And you're like, well, I want to do
Yeah.
this.
He
So, at what age did you start noticing stuff, and then did you actually take like interest into it?
um well, I graduated college with a biochemistry degree. So I wasn't even looking at construction.
Completely
I
opposite.
completely opposite. I went to med school for 1 semester. I went to NYU for 1 semester, and
Yeah.
then my older brother Chris passed away. I came back to help with arrangements in my family, and at that time, my dad was just in the middle of developing his multifamily.
Okay.
And so the land and everything, we were getting plans done with engineering and architects. So, I mean, my dad's he started at a very late age.
Hmm.
So he came when he was about 35. So he didn't start the daycares until he was about 40.
Oh wow.
So he had a late start. He's 68 right now. So
That's proof though. I mean, you don't. It's
yeah,
not oh, I gotta wait or I gotta be too young to
rush.
do it.
Yeah, you can't rush it either. But at that time when I came back and just looking at all these plans, I had no idea what all these things were. I didn't know how to read any of them. He would ask, I mean, he's not the most tech savvy guy. He's old school,
Hmm.
obviously. But hey, can you look up this for me? Can you call this supplier? Can you get a bid for me? Can you call him? Can you tell him to meet us here? Can you text him or email him? So I would help him as much as I can. At that time, I took over. My wife took over one of the daycares, the one in Arlington, the,
Right.
the oldest one that we have. And so we were, our income was okay. Um, And with the multifamily, the 24 units, we just kept helping him. My wife is Mexican, so she speaks Spanish, so anytime there was a contractor, no offense to any, there's all kinds of
No, no.
contractors, but the majority of them right now around
Yeah,
me
dude, you're in
are
Texas.
Hispanic.
There's nothing racist about that.
Yeah.
You're in Texas. I
Um,
mean, that's just what it is.
yeah, I
They're
mean, my Spanish isn't great,
some of
so
the hardest workers.
exactly.
It's honestly, and not to get too far off, but some of the hardest workers are the ones that aren't from here. Like your dad, like
Yeah.
not from here, shows up and he's like, "Hey, there's opportunity." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not to sound funny, but some people who live here might not look at that and go, "Can I lease this building from you?"
Right.
They're not gonna ask that. They're just like, "Drop the kid off at daycare. I gotta hurry up and get to work."
Yeah, I mean, they see a for lease sign and they're kinda like, "Oh, it's for lease, I don't know, but let me ask about it. Well, how much is it? And what
Yeah,
do I need to do? And how much money do you make doing this?"
right.
It's a different ballgame, but,
So you
um
start helping it. Your wife was working at the daycare,
uh-huh,
or she was working at the daycare. She was managing the daycare,
right,
and while you were able to, so you're helping your dad,
uh-huh,
and you're learning at the same time.
right,
Basically, like it's not like hey, I'm gonna get paid a bunch of money. You're getting paid an education, right? You're learning
exactly,
so much more about what he's doing,
yeah.
and then is that when it started to kind of click? Like, wait a
Yeah,
minute, like this is
during that time, I was working as a loan officer, actually. I got hired with Chase to work as a loan modifications, so I was doing
okay,
default loans, but I was helping my dad a lot, and, that's when I saw everything, and I'm like, "Man, this is great," I see all these people coming together.
hmm
It's a lot of work. If you're not there 100%, like, if you're either you hire a GC or you're the GC.
right,
And in Texas, anybody can be a GC. I mean, my son can be a GC. Anybody can.
yeah,
We're one of those states where it's kind of weird, but he was always the GC for all his projects. So he liked to cut the costs as much as he could, obviously, but he had the experience. I mean, building code hasn't changed in so long until recently.
right,
So it was easy for him to do his things. But I picked up a lot of habits and I got a lot of good contacts from him. Some good, some bad,
yeah.
obviously, but
So
and
in GC, I gotta ask that because you
yeah.
said some states allow it, some states don't. So Texas, you don't have to have a license or anything like that. But in other
No,
states, so there are other states that you have to actually get licensed to become
there is.
a GC.
Yeah, there's like a minimum requirements. I mean, each trade though, I mean, your electrical, plumbing, and mechanical, your AC, you have to have a license for it.
Right.
Um, but in Texas, anybody can just be a general contractor
Hmm.
and be their own builder.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a requirement that in other states that they have
A
to say,
lot of
hey, you
them.
have to. So let me ask this: I mean, what is that for? Yourself, your dad, whatever. What does that typically save you guys when you build? Is there a certain percentage that kind of cuts out?
Yeah,
You know?
definitely. I would say on average, it's 15%.
Yeah.
That's normally what GCs charge. They look at the total build and they'll say, I'm going to charge 15%. So for us, if we're building a $2 million, $3 million project,
Hmm.
that's a big chunk of money, especially if you know what you're doing already.
Right.
Um, but it just depends on the project, really. You could have a small house, and some GCs will charge 10% or 8%. But you got to realize they've got all kinds of contacts. I
Yeah.
mean, the suppliers they have are not going to have it cost increase versus if you go and just go into like a local store and purchase something, it's going to be very expensive. Versus you have a long term history with the supplier,
Yeah.
they'll keep that rate for you. Like for example, COVID. When COVID hit and I was building my shopping center, costs went up 30%. And I was lucky enough to hold my price with the suppliers. 30% on you know, a $1.5 million build is a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was reluctant at that I had my dad's contacts to help me with it. So it ended up working good, but
And
it
they were
still
able
has
to
some costs.
keep the cost down in the
Exactly.
process. So what is it about? I gotta ask this because what is it about land that was intriguing for your dad? Like, most people they think like, well, when they come across real estate and they think, I know I did. I mean, single family homes or something already built,
Yeah.
a structure of sorts.
Right.
Why land? What was the thing that made him go, man, let's go to land? Because obviously, what you're talking about, it's a technique. Like you mentioned earlier
Yeah.
when we were talking about, how you do it. Um, why land? What was the thing?
He always tells me because they're not building it anymore. You can't
That's
find
it.
it. Yeah.
And
That's
not
what he
making
said.
any
They're
more.
not making any more. Um, I guess the tax purposes were really what drove him to do that because he was either going to pay such a high percentage or reinvest it. But for land, I guess he was just reluctant to find that seller. that was willing to owner finance for him so much at that time, and he didn't have, I guess, the equity and other things to pull out and make a big down payment. So I
Mm.
guess just the terms of those loans were good for him, which is why he was leaning towards land. But I guess once you get into something, you kind of just keep it going. Like the
Yeah,
daycares were going, the land was going, so
you learn it.
it worked for him. Yeah,
That's crazy, man. So I want to get into you know, talk about the last couple years. So you mentioned COVID. What have you seen in the last few years? Just, I mean, because this last few years has just gone wild.
it's nuts.
So with the time that you guys, obviously with y'all's experience and what you've been doing, what's different? Is there anything different?
Definitely. Of course, costs are ridiculous. But if you're lucky, like I said, if you've got a good relationship with suppliers,
Hmm.
it really won't make a huge difference. I know a lot of people won't know about that because if you aren't building and you haven't been building for the past 6 years, you won't know what costs were before COVID versus what they are now. The big box stores, they've marked the prices nuts.
Yeah,
But honestly, if you have an account with them and you've got a solid history, they're gonna honor certain prices for you. And I mean, you buy in bulk, you save. But yeah, we were looking at a 30% increase in all material costs. So when I built the shopping center here in Mansfield, it was literally in 2020.
right.
It was right when it happened. Is
Did
right
you
when we
did you
did that.
start building that right before everything went bananas, or
Yeah.
did you start building it right after everything went bananas?
So when you do commercial, the plans take forever. The permits take forever. Especially right now at that time, Mansfield was growing so quickly they didn't have enough staff to keep up with demand.
Gotcha.
So our project got delayed and delayed, but we were at the end of 2019, so it was right when it hit us,
Okay.
and then the shutdown happened. I believe it was in
It was March.
March or
March.
something like that.
I will
So
never forget that.
yeah,
That's
we
up there with 9/11. Where were you? I was in math class. Where were you when they announced that they're just gonna shut it all down and take,
close it.
and close
Yeah,
it, and their business just goes, oh no. Yeah.
but yeah, we were right in the middle, and it stopped us for a while. We went back to our lender because we knew we had to add some kind of fees involved to no matter what fees were going to go up, whether it was with labor or material or anything. So we had to go back to the lender, um, set a new budget, and give ourselves like an allowance of at least 10%. So we went back and asked for 10% more. It wasn't a lot, but based off that loan, it was expensive. So
Yeah.
um, it was a unique experience though because a lot of the contractors obviously wanted to either not have as many guys out or they were afraid to send so many guys out.
Mm.
So it was more of a delay than anything. It wasn't as expensive, but it was more of just a
Did that
delay.
that put you in the front seat of the Bobcat? Or
I learned how to use all those
did
machines.
you
I learned how to use all of them, man. I just like to play with them, honestly. They're fun. I'm not gonna lie.
That's funny. But I remember, like, because so anybody that's listening to this, we both, all three of us do jujitsu. And I remember one time, you and I were talking, and you said that you're like, yeah, man, I've been running it was either a Bobcat or a forklift all day long. You're like,
Yeah,
been running this thing all day long. So, um,
yeah.
you've had to go through all of that.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I learned how to use all the equipment. I know how to do maintenance on them now, but I've got accounts with some people who do the rentals, and
Yeah.
so I'm lucky because it's. I mean, Mansfield. I'm just down the street from so much. It's so
Mhm.
easily accessible to stuff. So I was lucky.
Yeah. So what do challenges? Let's talk about that. So what would you say is, some of the biggest challenges as far as, you know, building or, developing? Like, what would be the biggest challenges you run into
Um,
where it's going to be it's probably going to be a challenge?
man, I hate to say it. I don't know who's gonna watch or not, but it's just finding the right contractors.
Yeah.
You have to find the right people. It's so difficult. I mean, you could get a good feeling by talking to somebody, and then when they show up, it's different. Do you have to
Mm,
babysit them? Do you have to give them like a clear, plan on what to do and when the deadline is, or can you just have them go in there and you don't have to be there?
yeah.
Staying on that deadline is important because when you have a loan, for construction, you do interest only for so many months, and then after those months, then the principal kicks in. So ideally, you want to have it built and already leased before the principal kicks in, or else your payment's going to be way up there versus your interest only on the draws you make for construction.
Gotcha.
Um, but the biggest thing is just finding the right people. That's just the most important. I mean,
Do you find that some of the guys, they'll start out like a rock star, and then you're like, man, I gotta let this dude go.
well, we've been through it. I mean, we've got guys that are young, energetic, and they're ready to go, and then we've got guys that are, like my dad. One of my dad's contractors was 78, and he was out there from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Working hard, working harder than a 20-year-old. You
Just
know what I mean?
old school hard
Old school
working.
hard worker, and you can't find them like that anymore. But I mean, we've had equal shares of good and bad. You
Yeah.
know,
Hmm. That's cool. So contractors is pretty much. It's funny because he says that with property management. She's like these contractors.
yeah.
That's like the hardest thing they deal with. So what about permits and stuff? Is that usually pretty simple? Kind of going through that
Uh,
process.
yeah, you have to know what you're doing, and I mean, I hate to say it, but you have to have a relationship with
Yeah.
the city, and then the inspectors. Um,
So you gotta walk in. They gotta be like, you gotta be like, hey Bob, what's happening? And they're like,
yeah.
hey Amir, how are you?
Even then,
Here's what I
though,
got today, Bob. Take a look.
that's true.
Is
I
that
mean, even then, we had such a terrible experience, like I was saying, with the inspector for the multifamily when we did the fire blocking for the outlets.
yeah.
Um, we got inspection for the electrical rough-in, and we were doing the top out. So we were putting the covers and the plugs, and for wood construction, you have to have fire blocking around the outlets.
Hmm.
Very, very particular because of the fire. Um, we got inspection, and this was mainly, my dad is a GC, so I mean, you got to be on top of it. But they sheetrocked over it after or maybe they sheetrocked before the inspector looked at it but one unit. So there's 24 units.
Right.
That one unit he looked at, and I guess they did fire block it, and the inspector passed. All the other 23 units they did not fire block. So they
Yeah.
had to go back, cut a 4x4 square, fire block, repatch, repaint, retexture.
It's just a
It's
pain.
just a
It's more
pain.
money you gotta deal
But you gotta
with.
have the right contractor, so
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You gotta be on top of everything. There's so many moving things in construction that if you're not careful with, it'll end up costing you more money, more time, and a delay
Right.
for your date, so
That's
Are there
crazy.
certain cities that are more strict or more lenient?
yeah, I mean, we're in DFW, so I wanna say those small cities, they don't have a big staff, and a lot of the inspectors think they know it all. And they think they're the architect, or, at the end of the day, like I said, if you're kind and courteous and you're respectful and you're doing things per code, there shouldn't be issues. But I guess just currently with this demand, with how busy it is, everybody is just upset with the cities because they're just taking so long for permits.
Yeah.
Mansfield has been okay. It's just the review was very, very tedious because they have a few people when they should have a whole room, and the inspections go quick. The inspectors are great, but if you're a big time developer, I'm sure it'll be easier versus a small time like us. You know what I mean? They know you've got a team. They know you've got things being looked at all angles.
So you just and slide them a couple $100 bills,
No, no,
table. They just like pull out your wallet.
that is not true.
There you go, Bob. It's just some. Good to see you today.
No, we like to
Move
give
it.
them. They don't even like taking lunch gift cards. They're like, we cannot accept this.
Oh,
Is
really?
not. We're not allowed to do this. I'm like, just go have lunch on us, man.
Just
It's
just
no big
take the
deal.
lunch and approve the plans. I
We're
got stuff to do.
just approve it. Give us the green
I've
tag.
got concrete coming in 2 days. I've already lined it up just to prove it. That's awesome. So what was one of your most enjoyable projects to work on? Whether it was your own or your dad's or just out of just any of the building and development stuff. Like what was one of the ones that was the most fun and memorable that you enjoyed?
Um, Obviously this one's been good because I've had my kids with me, but the Fish City one was great because my dad had a lot of his usual contractors that we were familiar with.
Yeah.
Some of them were family friends that aren't here anymore. So it just left a great experience. Being a teenager and you're going and seeing construction, you really don't know what's going on until you're an adult and you know what's going on at
It's
that
the
time.
get in the car, kids. We gotta go.
Yeah, you're annoyed. You're sitting there and you're like, the smell of lumber, it just smells weird, and there's nails, and I have sandals on. But, you know, seeing my dad come home and, we're not very dark, but we're medium complexion, and seeing him just sunburn and tan from being in the sun all day.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're like, man, like, you sit back and you think, look, there's this guy who came here, he didn't have anything, and he made such a good example for his children,
Hmm.
and he worked so hard, and he's still working hard till this day. He's managing his own 24 units,
Yeah.
and all his properties, and you just appreciate it. Some people are different, so they may not think that way,
Mhm.
but for me, just that project was great because I got to see so much of him actually being involved over there.
Right.
You know,
So I gotta ask. So and you guys don't own this Fish City Grill building anymore.
not
It's
anymore.
since sold.
We
So
sold
you
it.
just drive by and look. You're like, we built that. Like, I feel like I
Yeah.
would. I feel like every time I drive by Fish City Grill now, and you said Fat Daddy's as well, right?
Fat Daddy's and our place is
That will
just
be
down the street too.
yeah.
Yep.
See, I'll forever go Amir, Amir, Amir.
Yeah,
Like you know what I mean? Like
the
I
history stays.
the history. Like I because I had no idea. Now I'm like it'll always be that. So, um, that's crazy to think. So you drive by that and you look and you're like,
Yeah, I mean,
I know
there's a
that
there's a
place.
small shopping center behind Fish City that he owns and manages, and he built that as well.
Okay.
And so we go there frequently. I mean, we've got friends that are leasing spaces from there, but it's fun. I mean, you see it, and then you tell your kids, hey, we built
Well,
that, and
yeah.
they're like, they don't really know what's going on. They're like, oh, okay, but yeah, it's a good
So
experience.
how often you like your own kids and you have how old are your kids right now?
I have a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old right
So
now.
so do you take them with you a lot? Or they kind of see like this
Yeah,
is what dad's doing or
yeah.
get in the car, kids, we gotta go.
I mean, hey, when work calls, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But like right now in my shopping center, I'm building a ballet studio, and my daughter's been in ballet for 5 years. She loves ballet, so we go in there. She sees the metal studs and she sees the electrical going in. I'm like, this is the room. This is how my son likes to get on the little scissor lift and go up and down. So it's good. It's good. It's fun for them.
Being
It might
kids.
be dangerous, but it's fun for them.
That's awesome.
Well, if
But
all else fails, you have a daycare.
That's
yeah.
true. The daycare, daycares are. It's like I was telling him. We have friends that, they don't just have one source of income. They have that fallback business or that fallback income. You got to have something. Everybody has a reserve. The daycare is so great because it's part of our history. I
Right.
mean, we do very well at it because we're very loving. I mean, we know how to run a business well. We know how to treat our staff well, and we know how to do things as far as the accounting side goes. We're not reckless. We don't just spend, spend, spend.
Right.
Um, we understand all kind of aspects of it. My parents did it for 30 years. My mom did it for 30 years, and my wife worked for my mom before she went and opened up this one, took over this one. But daycare's a different ball game than construction, of course. But that's
Right.
that's heavily dependent on kids and
But it's what
staff.
started it. Initially
It
it
is.
was the thing that built the capital for your dad to do it and then you get to learn from him
Yeah.
and then do it yourself as well.
Yeah. I mean, I bought 120 acres in Travis County just because I wanted to say, "Hey, Dad, I bought land just like you." And now I regret it almost a tad
Do
because
you?
that income, that source of that money could have went towards another build, but uh, that's more of like, okay, way down the line, and we have other investors in that with
Yeah.
me. So
Is that that's the one I remember you telling me like you had to go out on a four-wheeler and
yeah.
pretty much ride the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. It's got its own little Brazos River runs through there. It's 120 acres. It's got game, wildlife. It has a trailer home on it, so it's nothing huge. But
Any
that,
plans with that?
you know,
Maybe?
maybe we're turning it into like something where people could come in and rent and just go hunt for now
Yeah.
because
That's
there's,
what
I
I was
think,
thinking.
hundreds of thousands of acres there.
Yeah,
So
we are in Texas.
right, it's it's
It's
it's
what is
it's
it
fun
like
for
it's
a lot
like
of people.
guns,
At least
God
pay
and
the taxes on
Yes, exactly. We're
it.
outside city limits, so the
Texas is
taxes are not that crazy
Texas
there.
is like guns, religion, and guns, God, and football. That's about it. Um, no, but no. So you plan to eventually hunt, or maybe let people hunt. Is it an area that may grow much further? Was that kind of part of the plan too, where that
No.
like a Mansfield, it's gonna expand
I
out?
wish. I think what 70,000 acres undeveloped there. So
Okay,
it's just really just country, a lot of animals out there. But I mean, if anything were to develop, I would be lucky.
yeah,
But I don't know. We'll just see. That was mainly for tax purposes too,
okay.
to get that money put into something else.
So how I hear that just as a because when I like we do things for tax purposes. So,
Right.
but on land, if there's nothing coming in, like, what are your thoughts on that? What's your thought process on that? Because when I see it, I'm like, we got to buy that so that it'll, this income will produce this. But if you're buying it and just holding on to it, how does
Yeah.
that work? Can I explain that? Run through that with,
Capital gains tax is a lot.
yeah,
It depends on how much you make, but you're normally at 30 to 40% of what you take. So 30 to 40% is almost half.
right,
And let's say you're paying commission, closing costs. I mean, you have $1 million deal, you're probably walking away with 350, 400 if you really just want to take that home. Versus if you put it into something, and it doesn't have to just be all one thing. You can put it into several things, land, houses, or anything, and
mm,
you don't pay taxes as bad. I don't know what the amount is or the percentage is.
just 1031 it into the
Just
land.
1031.
I guess that's my question is why when you like, what made you say, let's 1031 into the land versus 1031 into
Rental property
a rental
or
property
something.
or shopping center?
Yeah. So
Like,
for
what's the mindset behind that? Because a lot of people, I ask that 'cause so many people think like, I have to put it into a rental. I have to put it into a multifamily. I have to put it in something that's going to produce the income. Whereas like the land, it's not. So what's the mindset behind that? 'Cause obviously it works. I mean, like I
yeah.
said, you guys do it. What's the thought process?
So obviously the future development's important, but for us, there was no particular reason for that piece of land,
Hmm.
but we wanted to buy land just so we could eventually divide it up and maybe give our kids certain portions of it
Okay.
for my purpose.
Gotcha.
My dad's were a little bit different because he wanted to build on them. I don't plan on building on it unless something else builds around me, but I wanted to give, 50 acres to one of my kids and 50 acres to another kid
Gotcha.
so they can have that for their future or whatever. You never know, in 20 years there might be a Walmart there.
Yeah.
And you get lucky, you know what I mean? Like
What
my
do
dad did. So
yeah,
Move the
yeah.
animals out, and here
right.
comes Walmart.
I
What
mean, you
yeah.
get income. You could develop it into income producing if you do the wildlife and game over there. If you rent it or you have like little exhibits there where the people could go and just like a cabin.
Right.
We've got one person there who stays there full time and he lives there for free. But you got to remember, this is all agriculture exempt. We pay zero taxes on it. We pay $5 a year.
There's your
Wow.
answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're paying
Right.
$5 a
Yeah.
year.
That
Left out that little
yeah.
nugget.
So I mean, it's not property taxes that are eating us up. It's
That's the
the
answer.
maintenance.
There's really not much eating you up at all because if you
No.
have ag on it, then you're just okay. Yeah, see,
Mhm.
that's your answer. There's your little nugget. There's your highlight reel, people, right there. That's cool. Okay. So the whole idea is when you 1031 it, you're like, look, I'm a 1031 it. We don't have any income coming off of it, but at the same time,
No
it's
expenses.
no
No
expenses
expenses. Yeah.
and there's no taxes and or little to none. Um, and so it doesn't really matter.
Right.
You're just gonna hold on to it.
Even if there is taxes, though, you write that off. I mean, you could always write that off and use that for your end of the year anyway.
Right.
My
Mm.
dad's very old school, but he writes literally everything off,
Right.
which isn't a good thing because if you go apply for a big loan,
Yeah.
they're gonna say, "Well, you don't make any money,"
Yeah.
and he says, "Well, I do, but I wrote everything off." That's something that my dad and I have something in difference where I don't write everything off. I pay taxes on my income
Yeah.
because if I apply for a huge loan, they're okay. But he's very old school, like I said. He does not pay any taxes.
I understand that. Misty and I have been through that a lot.
Been
We're
there.
we're a lot like your dad. We do what we can to say,
Nobody
the
wants to pay taxes,
yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
We're already paying enough, right?
the business is buying a sandwich today.
Right.
It's not good.
But even on land, if there was no structure and stuff, you'll still have appreciation over time. because
Exactly.
It'll still appreciate.
Yeah.
It's still growing. Yeah.
And they're not making any more of it. So I
Mhm.
mean, you've got it, and it's you can't duplicate that certain land,
You aren't even trying to sell me and you're convincing me right now.
right?
I need to buy some land. Misty, we're gonna walk out of here with some land here in a couple months.
Land
So-
costs are on the rise, though. I will
That's
tell
Yes.
you, land
nuts.
costs are getting higher and higher.
So I got to ask this. So walk us through like a project start to finish because someone like myself or anybody who's never done any kind of building, like how do you value that? How do you, when you look at it, kind of walk us like start to finish from, you see it land, and you go, okay, if I do this, I can make this and then I can sell it for that.
Uh-huh.
So what does that look like?
So the most important is you got to have the survey on the property. If you want to build, let's say, homes, it's different than commercial. Commercial, you have to have parking spaces. For a house, you just have to have a driveway and a garage.
Right.
So you got to make sure it's accessible enough to put what you want to put in there. So the survey is the most important thing. I mean, the survey will show easements. It'll show how far back your building has to go. With the shopping center I didn't understand that at first, and I wasn't explained. My dad didn't explain it to the best of his knowledge. We had a setback of a utility easement. I think it was a 14-foot right away from the street because we're a text dot high or street.
Hmm.
And then we had a 19.5-foot easement for anything else. So our building was really pushed back from the street, and we wanted that high visibility.
Okay.
Um, so survey is the most important thing. It shows whatever's on there. It shows the property line too, of course. And then from there, really, it's just a takeoff in architect and engineering. Um,
So when you look at a property, so the very first thing you stop and or you assess it by the survey.
yes.
So it's already like they've already got a survey on it.
Yeah.
You just stop, you look at it like this is what it looks like. This is what you know that with what you're dealing with, maybe the city or whatnot,
Yeah.
what you can probably do, and
Yeah.
then you start kind of planning it out from there.
Right. It may have restrictions or not, but if there's a future use, it'll have a plat and it'll show where the building would look and the nature of it. So surveys are super important. I mean, that's something I ask even before I even want to even look at a property because I'm like, well, what if this property isn't like one of my dad's land is very weirdly, oddly shaped, and you're like, well, what am I going to do with that odd, corner over there? I don't know. Maybe I tell them I don't want that part of it, or
Yeah.
who knows? But um, from there, really, it's just up to your design. And when you sit with an architect and engineer, um, the majority of your costs are going to be on how you build it. I mean, obviously, square footage is so important, but for commercial, it's way different because you have to meet certain code requirements versus, residential. Um, Certain communities will have minimum square footages, or certain HOAs will have minimum square footages you have to build. So he did buy land in Cedar Hill, close to like Joe Pool Lake in that area,
Yeah.
Lake Ridge area, and beautiful area. I mean, beautiful homes, $1 million homes. But it was so odd because his lot was 1.5 acres, and he said, "Well, I want to put two houses there and make double my money if I build two houses and sell it."
Hmm.
But they said, "No, you have to have a minimum of 3,000 square feet for each house, plus the garage and the backyard and the setback." So it ended up just being one house.
Yeah. So it didn't fit.
It didn't fit. Yeah.
So you go and you look at the land. Okay, so look at the survey, and then after that, so architect and designing, is that usually a pretty big expense, or is that a small? Is that, I mean,
Uh,
what does that typically run for someone if they're gonna be like, hey, let's.
it's about so when you get your civil is very important because civil will have your drainage, um, your erosion. It'll have where the sewer connects.
Mm.
All those are different from commercial because commercial can have nothing or utilities cannot be there. But I want to say on average it's about 4 grand for each trade. So you're looking at about 12 to 15 for everything
Yeah,
for plans and architect fees.
and that's obviously you don't you're not doing you're doing that after you've purchased.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have an idea of the survey is the pre-purchase inspection per se,
Well,
and then
yeah.
from there, then you step up. You're like, all right, we buy it, and then you go, let's go and get
I
whoever's
would recommend doing preliminary because what'll happen is if you buy a piece of or if you are looking at buying a piece of property, or let's say you have bought it,
Hmm.
you like the survey, you think you can build it, it's zoned right. You have to have a pre-development meeting anyways, just to see if the city will even approve of that use.
Gotcha.
Um, like for example, I'm trying to build houses on the back of my shopping center, so I
Okay.
would have to change zoning, but I got an engineer to do a preliminary design on these 4 houses that I want to put back there. The city said, no, it's not the style we're going for on this street.
Hmm.
We want a ranch style home versus a modern style. I was going for a very easy, modern, they're like, no, we want like the traditional shiplap. We want it ranch style. We want a porch in the front and then the garage in the back.
Hmm.
So I would recommend after you get the survey and all that done, get a preliminary plan done. And those don't normally cost but anything but a few $100s because it's 1 hour of the architect's time.
Okay.
Um,
Gotcha.
and then from that, you present it to the city. Either the architect does or the design professional, or you can go as a developer and present it. And they'll give you feedback. I mean, city council will say, "Oh, I don't like this. This doesn't look right," even though it's your land.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you're like, "Well, it's my land. I want to do what I want on it. I want to build this." And they're like, "No, There's always ways around it, and at the end of the day, it comes down to the money
Yeah.
How
because it's
long
going to
does that
cost money.
process take?
It's a long process. So it takes 3 months to get in line, and then 3 months to have it looked at, and then you're looking at an additional 3 months for approval because it has to go through hearing. And if there is a zoning change, there's 30 days where anybody can come and disagree with it, and write a
Mhm.
letter. So you're looking at 9 months just for that.
Damn.
Yeah,
That's like
nine
I
months
said.
is.
That's a long time.
So are you
Like,
tying up the purchase for that long, or?
I mean, that's hard because what if they say no,
Mhm.
and you have that land, and now you don't want to. Your goal is to do this, and they tell you can't. So that's why a lot of the times people will buy and say, "I want to. Is this already approved? Or could you go to city and see if they will allow this
mhm.
before I make an offer or before we go under contract
Or have multiple options of
or
what you
have
want to do
options?"
with it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now
So,
we're looking at putting another commercial property in the back of the commercial property.
yeah. So is that's a good question. Is it uncommon that people tie it up for a while, or is it common that
Uh,
they'll try to tie it? Depends on the owner, I
it
guess. If
just
the
depends
owner
on the
will,
owner. Some people want to just purchase it and sit on it and then just bite the bullet for that period of time. Or some people are
see,
like, I want to move in. I'm paying top dollar. I want it to be approved already.
yeah,
Um, but that's why zoning is so important. A lot of people don't like changing the zoning unless it's a huge, huge subdivision.
and even changing the zoning is a pain in the ass.
Even changing the zoning is a pain then, yeah.
Huh. Okay. Man. So then after, so once you do that, and then now you've done all the preliminary, take 9 months, and then you can break ground.
Then you have to get well, let's say that that's approved. Then you have to get plans reviewed. And
Gotcha.
review takes about a month. And then you'll have comments and obviously all that. And so a month to 2 months. Right now it's taking a little bit longer, obviously, but after that, you're okay. You get your permit to go. You're good to break ground. Um,
You go from there.
you go from there. Yeah.
So how do you determine the value of something like from complete scratch? You know, if you go and you're going to build something, um, obviously with like homes, you can say, well, it's
Yeah.
going to be this, but certain things like
Especially if there's nothing in the area.
nothing in the area. How are you
Yeah.
determining that? Like, you're going to do this and I get to that. How's that work?
You have to have a good idea of material costs and labor costs.
Hmm.
So we go by square footage. Everybody likes to say price per square foot, triple net, all that's important with commercial. But if you know your cost for material, you can generally have a good number. So on average, right now, if you're building, you can go, I mean, it can range though. I mean, you can go high end or you could just go super basic white box. You can go from 100 a square foot to almost 250 a square foot. It just depends on the size and the type of things you want to put in and how you want to build it.
You mean sell it for, or you mean construction costs,
Construction cost
100 square
itself.
foot or 200 square foot? And then do you typically try to sell it for an extra $50 a square foot after that? Or like, how does that work? Like, how are you coming up with that end number?
So it definitely is going to be about the comparables in the area. And
Mhm.
so, but for sure, if it's an investment property, like let's say it's a commercial property, you've got to look at your income in there. You got to look at your cap rate. You got to look at your operating expenses. But when you start construction and you have a goal, okay, I want to build it for 1.5 million. I'm going to sell it for 3.5. You've
Right.
got to justify that $2 million difference because somebody's going to ask, how much did it cost you to build? Oh, it cost me about 1.5. Well, why are you selling it for 3.5? Where
Right.
did that 2 million come
Yeah.
from? Well, I'm asking $30 a square foot for rent and $10 triple net. So everything's paying for itself. It's cash flowing, 20,000 a month. And if you get a 15-year note, there you go. The money is justifiable. But the cost of land has to be factored in also. A lot of people don't do that when they do their builds. They say, "Oh, I'm gonna build it for 120 a foot."
Just the building.
But that's just a building. Your land costs are expensive too. Like for me, I have 2.2 acres that I built on. Only about an acre and a half was actually used to get built on. So my cost per square foot looks higher, even though the building was smaller than that whole piece of land. See what I mean?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's a little weird, but
Hmm.
yeah.
So then how do you, okay, so you mentioned, I want to kind of go back to the collateral of the land. Can you
Yeah.
explain that? Like, how does that work? You said, that he had used the collateral, or how y'all had used the collateral,
Use the land
use
as
the land
collateral.
as collateral, right, to do that. So explain that. How does
I
that work
mean,
for?
if it's paid off, it's great. Luckily, these were all paid off. So the land that I built on was my dad's. So I made a little contract with my dad. I said, Dad, I'm going to pay you back once I sell it. Once I cash flow, I'll pay you monthly. If I sell it, I'll pay you a full sum. When you go to a lender, there's different lenders that take different things. I mean, they honestly don't care. They look at your monthly income, but
Mhm.
really they want to know is what do you have to lose if you don't pay? And so if you have the land that you're building on set as a collateral, that can be your down payment. That's 20%. And that can also be something that the bank uses as leverage for you. Um, 20% of a $2 million thing, that's a lot of money to
Yeah.
just put as a down payment. Plus, you're going to go into construction costs. So you're looking at a ton of money. But if you own that land, even if it's a small piece of land, and you say, hey, can I use this as collateral? What's it appraised at? Oh, let's just say 500K. 500K, $2 million. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
They can help. That's a
Even
different
will
level.
they still, even if it's not paid off, they'll still use as collateral
It just depends on how much you owe.
if there's a lot of equity in
If
it.
there's a lot of equity in it,
Then they'll
yeah.
do it.
Yeah,
That's
because whatever's being built on it, if you default, is
It's-
theirs.
They're gonna take it, and whatever that building's
It's pretty
appraised
low
at.
risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he added to it. I like that.
Thanks for the donation.
Yeah,
Thanks for it.
appraisal versus what I really paid for it. That's a big
Mhm.
difference. So
So how often do you guys typically like to hold properties, just, I mean, yourself or, your dad, like just you guys, because so I hear it, I'm like, that's family investing. That's really, that's,
yeah,
how often do you guys like to hold, or do you prefer to sell?
um,
What's that?
my dad's way different. I mean, he's sold 2 residential properties recently that he's held for a long time. He was renting them. He regrets it now because cost of rent is going up because nobody wants to buy a home right now.
See, I don't want to have that feeling. That's why
It's
that's
it's
why I
not a
never
good
sell
feeling.
anything. Cause I'm like, I know I would just go, damn, Misty, why did we do that?
Yeah.
You can't go run back and get it. But then at the same time, I'm like, man, I'm missing out on that extra 100,000, 200, whatever that I could just take and put it over here.
Yeah. I mean, but so I just got done with this one. I'm still almost finishing the interior for the shopping center, but I got an offer on it. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, I talked to my wife. I said, look, Daisy, do we sell it or do we wait for the economy to just pick back up or what do you think? And she said, well, what's your goal? I think you just have to have a goal. Well, if I want to make $1 million on this deal, I can sell it. If I want to make 2 million, I can wait a few more years.
Yeah.
So it just depends on each individual. But my dad liked to hold it for a while so he can get that equity in it. He can have his net worth build up. He can use other things as down payments, as collateral. Versus if you sell it quickly, you'll make that quick income, but you got to look at other things like the taxes. You got to
Right.
look at things like that. Is it really going to make sense? So I'm still going back and forth. I don't know if I should sell it or not. I mean, I'm on
Yeah.
the same boat, but it's nice to see, okay, I can get this income right now. Maybe I can put it towards another project, or maybe I just wait 2, 3 more years and I'll get triple of what I would have got now.
Yeah.
So does it make sense? I guess so.
Huh. So as a rookie builder, somebody who's just starting out, they could just be building a home or something. Like, what would you give advice for someone who says, man, I want to go out and build this, and you know,
I I would say have a mentor, have a good relationship with contractors. I always get 3 bids. I know some people hate to say that because my dad was the guy who was like, I've got one contractor. I don't care what his price is. I'm going with him.
yeah,
That can be a good thing, but that can be a bad thing because you don't want to overpay. But then again, if you you're going to get bad service because you get cheapest bid,
right,
you can't always do that. So you want to just be on that medium, mainly low medium, but
yeah,
not the higher side. But it's super important to just get a lot of bids. You got to educate yourself on prices because it changes. And if you don't have a good supplier, it's going to hurt you and you
yeah,
will just regret it.
Yeah, it sounds like supplier contacts are huge.
Very important. A lot of people don't understand that. And it's eye opening for a lot because when they start building, they realize, oh, I can make up for it because, let's say the cost of this bathroom is supposed to be 20K. Well, I like these floors better. Now it puts it at 26. And then before you know it, you're at 30. And then you're like, well, the living room, we'll just pull it out of the living room. We'll make the living room a little bit less fancier.
Slippery slope.
It adds up. It can be really scary.
What's that? You guys seen that? Like, there's I could do it cheaper, and you have the guy that has like the drawing of like the horse, and then it gets worse and worse on the
That's not
backside.
always true.
We'll just pull that shit out the living room. That's fine. Put it out the living room. We're good.
That can't be true. You can't. You honestly don't want to go with the cheapest, but the
Yeah.
the most expensive isn't always the best either. You can get
Right.
people
Correct.
like if you're a rookie builder and somebody says, "I want to charge you 50K," the true cost was 30. But man, you just got played because this guy knows you're a rookie builder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Took you for a ride. So what would you say some of the I like to kind of do like four quick questions.
Yeah.
What are question one would be what's one of the best lessons you've learned, through experience?
Uh, is to not set unrealistic deadlines.
Okay.
That's super. I think the most important because with the COVID, look at what happened, and then even the rebound from that was tough. So I always plan just for a little bit extra. I would say 6 weeks minimum extra. Tell yourself that goal, but just plan for extra time.
There for more time.
Yeah,
Less stressful.
definitely.
What would you say your secrets to success is as far as, just your business and your daily habits and things like that?
Um, I have the right mindset because I'm around a lot of good people.
Yeah.
I don't really like to be with negative people. I don't like to talk down on others. I like to just keep it positive. I like to listen to a lot of positive stuff. We all have our days, but I feel like when your mood is down, everything else starts to turn back down too. So and it's hard because of nowadays what's going on, but I'm just around a lot of good people. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It took even some family. I mean, I had to literally tell them, like, I just cannot be around you. It's just every time I come around you, I just go down. And then your business gets affected and
Right.
everything else gets affected. So,
Yeah. Cut them out.
yeah.
Any books you'd recommend that you like, or any kind of not books, but just material that you're like, hey, this really helped me move
Yeah.
forward?
The Think and Grow Rich was good. Rich Dad Poor Dad was good. Those were really, really. I still read them now. I read them all the time.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. Alvarez
Yeah.
posts all these amazing podcasts with these, speakers, and real estate investing is super important. It's so common now, but to find great content is becoming more and more good because everybody's doing it. But if you find the right person and stick with them, they put out good things, and sometimes it's
They can guide you.
small details. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about, okay, this one I like because I have these myself. I always like to ask this question. What is one of your favorite phrases or mantras that you live by? You probably say it all the time at home or to your wife or, you know,
Ah,
or
man, there's
to
so
your
many.
kids or
I have things all over my walls everywhere, but I mean, I would just never give up. I mean, never give up because when we went through COVID, we wanted to give up at one point. I
Yeah.
mean, we had the funds, but we were like, "Is this worth it?" But I would just say never give up. Really, I
tell
mean,
yourself.
on anything.
Yeah.
It could be in construction, marriage, anything, business. So
Tell yourself, never give up. Keep going, keep
yeah,
going,
keep
keep going.
going.
I love it. Any new advice, any advice you'd give someone who was just getting started, not necessarily building, but just as an investor, or, they're listening to this and they've never thought about building, never thought about developing, never thought about putting their money in any kind of real estate. I mean, what would you give
Yeah,
advice for that
I think like find a good mentor
mentor?
and study and ask questions and don't expect things to go your way the first time. It's gonna take a time. You can't just rush things, um, especially if you're new to it. And this can relate to anything pretty much. It's gonna take a time to grow, to learn it, and then experience failure and rebound, and then go forward. I mean, I've never asked my dad, but I want to ask him now that I'm talking to you. Did he ever? I'm sure he's lost money on some deals,
Yeah,
but did he ever ask for something and they straight up tell him no, and then he just stopped because of that?
right.
I don't think the answer is going to be yes, but I'm assuming. I've never asked him this, so I'm gonna ask him now that
Yeah,
I'm talking to you
got
guys.
some homework.
Keep that in my
Oh,
book too.
man. He's got some homework. That's awesome. So
Never give up.
yeah, so really mentors. That's one of the biggest things. Is
Yeah,
having
definitely.
feet around somebody, and you had that. You got
I
you got
did.
very fortunate, and you listened and paid attention,
Yeah.
and were like, huh, what are you doing, Dad?
I'm 100%, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, but I'm 100% not self-made.
Yeah,
I'm not a trust fund baby either because I work my butt off, but I had my dad as an example, and I see how hard he works and the things he sacrificed to get where he's at. where it's made it much more easier for me, obviously, to go into something versus other people who are starting brand new. And so I'm appreciative of that. I'm grateful, but I'm not going to let that make my mind say, well, I got it easy. Maybe just take it easy. I got the daycare. Maybe I just sit back and relax and coast.
Yeah.
Maybe that land that he's got, maybe one of them's for me. I don't know, but I'm not thinking that way. I'm saying, you know what? He's here. I'm going to prove to him that, hey, Dad, I'm going to go above and beyond what you did. I'm going to show everybody that I'm a hard worker just like you. I learned from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put what you made over here even better so that
Yep.
my kids can see that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
gave you a hand up,
yeah,
and you're going to take advantage of that
exactly.
and move it forward for the future.
We see that, man. I know you see that kids that don't, because to me, I don't think, like you said, you're like, I'm not self-made, but there's a lot of people. I don't think anyone's self-made 100% because at some level, someone had
Yeah.
to help you. So the difference was that you had access to someone who was doing it, and instead of being like, whatever, you
Don't waste
listened.
it.
Yeah, you didn't waste it. Whereas
Yeah.
you may, I, you could watch someone else who would have been like, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna go do this. And
Yeah.
like, man, you really missed out. They had a chance where I would have loved to have had a dad that was, I love my dad, but you know, my dad doing truck sales, like, he knows how to sell, very good salesman, but one of the top in his company, but he didn't do real estate. So,
Mm.
for me to watch that, my brothers actually work, both of my brothers work at the same company my dad works at. My dad works in corporate, my brothers don't. Or my brother, one's a salesman, one's a mechanic.
Okay.
But I'm the only one that doesn't. I'm the only one that had to go out and find other people,
Yeah.
someone like yourself that had to be like, hey, Amir, how do I build? And but you had that. You had someone that was already there.
Yeah.
You didn't ignore it.
Yeah. I mean, I could have just, like I said, coasted and say, hey, whatever. But, hey, Dad, you have this piece of land. Well, what can we do with it? What would be great right there? Can I start something? What do you think about it? How can I help pay you back? Not just take it for free and then just sit on my butt and relax and just keep it going. Um, it's just mindset though. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
if if you've seen it and you've experienced it, it's different than just like, okay, I'm going through something and I don't care. Versus you see what your parents have been through and the sacrifices. But everybody's different. I mean, what can we say? We can't judge people, but at the same time, if they've got things easy, they don't know it's easy until it gets hard. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, you definitely took advantage of it, man. I think that's great. You got what I think most people don't get is you got the educational part because that's the biggest payment. Because yeah, your dad could have put you to work and said, "Here, let me pay you, six figures or whatever," and then you just are comfortable and you're shuffling papers around and talking to the city, and you're like, "Yeah, I make good money," and but you never learned anything. But instead, you're like, "Hey, look, let me learn that." I would work for free all day long. I'm like, "Cool,
exactly.
I'll give me a bobcat. Let me go at it and figure this thing out," and then because then I can turn around and do it myself, and
Yeah.
that's the biggest payment. So,
Yeah.
um, so do you? Let me ask you this: as just like a developer builder, do you focus on more of your own stuff or do you ever help anybody else? Like, do you kind of actively go out and look for clients at all? Not I
Yeah.
say actively like looking at like you got like a big billboard or anything, but do you,
Right.
or do you kind of focus in on like, okay, I'm going to build this next project for me and then I'll sell it. Like, what does that look like
Yeah, so far I have not done any big projects for anybody as a GC or a builder or anything.
mainly for
Um,
yourself?
it's all been really just for me and family. I've done small little projects though for some family. There's like, hey, could you build me a driveway, or hey, could you build me a storage, or
Hmm.
a small little utility room? Yeah, we'll help for sure. I've got contractors like I know everywhere. So I'm like, well, I'll just introduce you guys. I'll give you my feedback. I've had people reach out and say, hey, go over plans with me. What do you think about these plans?
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Are you gonna charge me hourly for it?" I'm like, "No, I'll just look at the plans and give you my honest feedback.
Yeah.
I'll tell you if I would do it or if I wouldn't do it, and just don't take any hard feelings." But, um, yeah, so far it's just build for us and then sell and then move on to the next project.
It's the bluebell. You eat
Right?
all you can, and then you sell the rest. That's what our mentors Robin talks about. It's just like that's it, man. He's just, you eat as much as you can. So yeah, so your model's not that I'm gonna be. You're not the model of I'm gonna go and be a GC for everybody else, and then
Right.
you're more the opposite. You're like I'm gonna do it for us,
Yeah.
and then we'll sell it. And if we meet someone along the way,
Yeah.
and they want help, and you're the guy to do it, you're like, you know what, we can build that for you.
Right.
Be the guy to build. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, man, I greatly appreciate you coming on today. I know I learned some stuff. I hope anybody,
Thank you.
Definitely.
I'm sure Misty learned some things too. Great stories as well. And man, I'd probably love to have you back on one day. Kind of, tell you Tell us
Appreciate
about
it.
how, what you ended up doing with this particular property that you're like, should we sell? Should we not?
Definitely.
Um, but I had a great time, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys too. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Appreciate
And
it.
if and you guys out there that are watching this on YouTube or listen to iTunes or whatnot, you can keep the conversation going. Check us out, real estate for investing for retirement, and we'll catch you guys next time.